Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Olubi Adeniyi Adewale, your facilitator for the course CRS 823 Further Greek. I'm welcoming you to the second week of this class, and according to our timetable, we will be dealing with the Greek participles this week. Now, let me inform you that for brevity's sake and to avoid boredom, the video for the class this week will be in two parts. The first session will do a little bit of introduction to the participles, and we will stop at the end of the present participles mostly. And the second part will take up from the functions of participle as an adverb. Now, I ask you to concentrate and watch this video, go through the exercises so that you will have a very rewarding learning period. Now, if you are set, let's go on to the first part of this video. Good evening, my dear students, and welcome to the class on participles in Koine Greek. I am Olubi Adeniyi Adewale. Our objective for this class, by the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain what participles are, write the participles in its various forms, discuss the characteristics of participles, identify the function of given participles. Now, in other words, with this I mean that if you look at a passage of the Bible and you see a participle, you should be able to know what function that participle is performing within the sentence in which it has appeared. Let's begin by looking at two definitions of participles. Participles are verb forms that can be used, one as an adjective, two to create verb tense, three to create a passive voice. Now, one of the things that should strike your mind is function number one. Function number one is a function that is reserved for nouns. And participles are verb forms. So that should tell you that a participle has two characteristics. It can function as a verb and it can also function as a noun. And that's very important. Now, in the present, they usually end with ing suffix. And what do I mean by that? Any word in English ending in ing is actually a participle. For example, tell, it's a verb. Telling becomes a participle. Now, participles are words derived from verbs that can function as adjectives or as parts of verb phrases to create verb tenses. Now, this should prepare your mind for the kind of construction we are going to deal with this week. Participles. They are very, very enigmatic. Now, let's look at the participles in Koine Greek. The participle is a very important sentence element in Koine Greek. Dana and Manti, in their book written in 1927, page 220, has this to say about participles in Koine Greek. There are few languages which have equaled the Greek in the abundance and variety of its use of the participles, and certainly none has surpassed it. It means in all human history, till today, I can tell you, no language has surpassed Greek in the abundance and the variety of the use of the participle. An ancient grammarian said Greek has been called a participle-loving language. You see, because of the the manifold use of Greek. That's why it has been called a participle loving language. Now, Wilfred and Major actually gave us the statistics. Nearly one-third of Greek verbal forms are participles. And you will know that by the time you begin to read your Greek New Testament. Now, listen to this sentence. This wealth of significance, which belonged to the Greek participle at the zenith of its development, lies undiminished before the student of the New Testament and becomes a valuable asset in interpretation when adequately comprehended. Now, this should tell you that for you to be a very good interpreter of the Greek New Testament, you must comprehend participles. You must be able to understand and master the use of participles and their functions in the Greek language. I will request, therefore, that you try to master the participles as they hold a key to your mastery of the Greek New Testament. Now, let me take some further explanations here. A participle can be defined as a verbal adjective. That's exactly what it is. It's a verb, it's a noun, or even you can call it a verbal noun. Because it is formed from a verb, yet often modifies other words. Now, consequently, participles can be used in the following ways. One, an adjective, when it is used to modify a noun. Two, it can be used as a substantive. In other words, it can be used in place of a noun. It can also be used as an adverb. In other words, it modifies a verb. Now, let us look at the following examples. Now, let me pick my pen here. Okay, sorry. I just want to take an highlighter. The laser pointer. Good. Now, look at this sentence from Hebrew chapter 10, verse 37. O erkomenos ekai kai u chronisai. Now, your participle here is what I've put in the bold already. O erkomenos. Now, you will remember from your understanding of Greek previously that O is a definite article, and which means erkomenos here, which is the participle, is functioning as the subject of this sentence. Now, so the translation is the one coming. And if you look at the translation, the one coming is the subject of this sentence. And that means the participle here is used as a substantive. Now let's look at the second example from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. Alethiontes, de en agape, but speaking truth in love. Alethiontes here is translated speaking truth, and you discover that this is a verbal form, which, anyway, let's just say that this is the verbal use of the participle, this is the noun use of the participle. These are just examples for us. Now, let's begin to go down to real business. The form of the participle. Now, the easiest way to learn writing the participles, especially the present active participle, is to learn the participle form of the I me. And remember that your verb, the I me, is your verb to be. Am, is, are, was, were. Now, they have their form in the participle. And let's take a look at those forms. Now, in this table, you see that this first column is your case. This second column is the masculine form. This third column is the feminine. And this is the neuter. Now, the first part of the table deals with the singular form. And then the plural deals, the second part is with the plural form. Now, let's look. In the nominative, masculine is own. feminine is usi, neuter is on. In the genitive, you have utos, uses, utos. In the dative, you have onti, use, onti. And in the accusative, onta, usan, on. Now in the plural, we have ontes, usai, onta, uton, uson, onton, usi, usai, usi, and finally ontas, usas, onta. Now, I will have advised you to just memorize this paradigm, because with this paradigm, you can write the participle form of any present active verb. Now, let's look at our example of the present active participle of luo. In the nominative masculine, singular, you have luon. In the feminine, you have luosi. In the neuter, you have luon. Now, in the genitive singular, luontos, luoseis, luontos. Now, remember, all you need to do is to study this, and you discover that the endings we have studied before about your I me verb is what is playing out. Remember that lu is your verbal stem here. All others are just additions. Now, let's go on to the functions of the participles. The verbal function of the participle has to be noted in relation with the voice. In other words, is it an active voice? Is it a middle voice? Is it a passive voice? I want to believe that you know the differences between these three voices. And the tense, which has to do with the kind of action. Now, in all, only 4 Greek tenses has participles, and that's the present tense, the aorist tense, the future tense, and the perfect tense. The present participle indicates continuous action. In other words, in the present participle, the action is ongoing, while the aorist participle indicates a punctiliar action, an action that occurred maybe just only once. Now, you have to note that the time of action in participle is indicated in relationship to the action of the main verb. Now, we'll look at this more into details. The aorist participle indicates that action is antecedent to the action of the main verb. Remember that your aorist in Greek actually denotes a kind of past tense. So, when the participle is in the aorist, it means the action of the participle has taken place before the action of the main verb of that sentence. Now, the present participle indicates action that is contemporaneous with the action of the main verb. In other words, the action of the present participle and the action of the main verb of the sentence are going on simultaneously. Now, the future participle indicates action which is subsequent to the action of the main verb. Now, this means that because your participle is in the future, the action of the main verb, which is taking place right now, means that the action of the future participle will take place after the action of the main verb. Now, these are the interesting things about the participle. And then when you are talking about the perfect participle, it indicates an action which has become a state of being. So, when you are looking into the Greek text of the New Testament, you must be able to differentiate all this in your interpretation and your translation. Now, let's look at the examples of the present participle. Let's look at this sentence. Legon tauta o anthropos blepai ton kurion. The translation is, while saying these things, the man sees the Lord. Now, if you look at this first sentence, legon is your present participle. So, as a present participle, remember that in this sentence, your main verb is blepai. He sees. So, all anthropos blepais, the man sees the Lord. When did he see the Lord? When he was saying. So, the action of the saying and the seeing are taking place at the same time. Now, let's look at the second sentence. The daskomenos, upo tu kurio, o anthropos, lambalai, ten alethaian. Now, in that sentence, you will remember or you will note that lambanai is your main verb, while the daskomenos is your participle. So let's look at the translation. Two possible translations. While being taught by the Lord, the man receives the truth. The receiving of the truth and the teaching are simultaneous. Another way of saying is, as the man is being taught by the Lord, he receives the truth. Now, apart from the issue of action here, the first sentence, legon tauta o anthropos blepai ton kurion, illustrates one of the characteristics of a participle, the ability to carry a direct object. In this construction, tauta is the accusative and it is the direct object of the participle legon. Now, the participle as an adverbial modifier. An example here is erkomenoi ekeruson to euangelion. As they were going, they were preaching the gospel. Again, the going and the preaching are taking place simultaneously. The following is an example of how participle can be used as an adverbial modifier. In this case, the participle modifies the verb and tells when they were preaching. As an adverbial modifier, the participle will tell when, how, why, on what condition, by what means, under what circumstances an action took place. We will study this function in greater details when we come to learn the subordinate